Again, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, all excellencies, distinguished guests and participants. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the second day of the workshop on investing in South-South, investing in SDGs through South-South cooperations and triangle cooperation beyond COVID-19. This workshop is jointly organized by the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation and the United Nations Development Programme in partnership with the Middle East, North Africa Public Administration Research Think Tank Network. My name is Yuko Suzuki-Nab. I'm a Global Policy Advisor in UNDP's Bureau for Policy and Program Support, and I have the honor to moderate today's sessions. Now, this session today will be focusing on public-private partnership, particularly sharing perspective from country governments, private sector, international financial institutions, think tank, and academia, in terms of the role of the public-private partnership in facilitating and strengthening South-South investments. And we will be also looking at incentives and challenges for public-private partnership to really promote the South-South investments. In this context, we'll be discussing policies, legal, regulatory frameworks that can address existing challenges and also unlocking potential of public-private partnership for strengthening the South-South investments. We also be sharing some, something about tools and approaches around risk management and promoting South-South investments to really achieve the SDGs. The insight gained from this session today will also further inform research agenda of the South-South Cooperation Global Thinker Networks. And for this session, I am joined by 8 distinguished speakers from government, private sector, banking sector, social entrepreneurs, small medium enterprise, international financial institution, think tank, and academia. And each speaker will have 7 to 10 minutes. And to facilitate the panel discussion, I will be posing questions to each of them. Now, after the panel discussion, we have an opportunity for speakers to reflect on questions and comments from the audience. And to this end, before starting our session, I just wanted to have a few sort of housekeeping announcements. First of all, participants have the opportunity to pose questions and share your comments throughout the webinar by making use of the chat function. Live questions would not be taken. And after the panel discussion, I will be bringing those questions from the audience to each of the speakers. The chat box function is the only way that the audience to share your comments and perspectives. So please use the chat function to share your comments throughout the panel discussion. This event will be recorded and also share on the Global South-South Thinker Networks and the South-South Galaxy online platforms, along with a summary of the discussion. And again, each speaker will have 7 to 10 minutes to speak, and to facilitate sufficient, a discussion after the panel discussion, I kindly request all speakers to stick to the allocated time. And I'm sure by now we have been familiarizing with this Zoom functions and so on. So I know you have a very much, know what to do, but when you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. Language interpretation services from English to Arabic and Arabic to English is available for speakers and participants. Please select from the Zoom menu of the bottom of your screen. So with that household announcement, I'd like to begin our panel discussion today. Now, Arab states have engaged in South-South cooperations, benefiting from over 110 multilateral, bilateral, regional initiatives since 2005. And then I understand in the region, South-South cooperation is mostly facilitated through public-private partnerships and specialized funds. Now, despite the progress, both public and private investments need to increase if we are to achieve the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and implement the SDGs. public investment management and appropriate policy, legal, regulatory frameworks to unlock inclusive and sustainable private sector growth will be a key. But there's also a need for private investments in the region to shift away from energy-intensive industries and hydrocarbon sector towards the sector really promoting more sustainable growth and domestic employment. So the question really is what is needed to unlock the potential of public-private partnership to increase the South-South investments for SDG. So I would like to first start with country perspective. And to this, it is my great pleasure to welcome Ms. Nolde Tabet, Advisor to the Ambassador Director General of the Moroccan Agency for International Cooperation, who is in charge of national and international partnership programs. So, Mr. Tabet, Morocco actively facilitates foreign investments through dynamic macroeconomic policies and, trade liberalization, investments, and restructuring or structural reform. And I also understand Morocco has emerged as a regional investment hub and an active champion of South-South investments. So, can you share with us what has been the role of public-private partnership in facilitating and strengthening the South-South investment between Morocco and other regions, especially in low-income and least developed countries? And what are the policies, regulations, or legal frameworks that have been put in place in Morocco to really enable or still might be hindering South-South investments? And lastly, I know I have a lot of questions for you, but how has COVID-19 impacted this role of the public-private partnership and condition for increased use of public-private partnership in South-South investments in your country? Over to you.
Thank you. So first, thank you, Mrs. Nab, for this invitation. I want also to share the apologies of His Excellency Ambassador for not being able to join this very interesting regional workshop due to a last-minute engagement. And I'm humbly very happy to share Morocco view on his behalf. So I want also to warmly thank the organizer, namely the Minister of Foreign Affairs and of the Kingdom of Bahrain, the UNOSSC, UNDP, and MENAPAR TTN. So thanks to all of you. Then I want to also so my presentation will be in three main parts. So first will be the Moroccan approach to tackle the COVID-19 within a human-centered approach. The second will be the Morocco royal donation to support more than 20 countries in Africa during the COVID pandemic. And the last but not least, our Morocco strategy to face the COVID-19 pandemic and release the impacted sector and the economic release. So to start, so you know, as all the other countries, Morocco registered the first case of COVID-19 on 2nd of March. And early on the 20th of March, and even with the still very low number of registered cases, Morocco opted to a total lockdown, prioritizing then the crisis, prioritizing the citizen safety to manage this crisis. And this was the first decision, and it was very human-centered. First, that was very inspired by the guidance of our king, His Majesty Mohammed VI, and that will drive the rest of the action to the crisis management. And then at that time, many other actions were driven simultaneously. So the first one was the creation of a strategic monitoring committee who were put in place to supervise the undertaken action toward the pandemic from social, economic, and health point of view. And second, it was Morocco decided under the High Royal Instructions to create a special fund, a specific fund, huge enough to face and to handle the unexpected financial and economic impact of the pandemic on many sectors, including the informal sector. And the third action was it was actually the immediate action after the creation of the fund, is the enforcement of the health sector as the main sector that will be impacted by the pandemic, and where we had a lot of, as all the country, we had a lot of demand on the health sector. So it was the enforcement of the sector and the acquisition of the required material to face the pandemic, including from scratch building of big field hospital in many regions to enable the impacted citizen to be served from health point of view. And then we had a very huge mobilization of financial support mechanism to enable the impacted citizen to face the economic impact of the pandemic, while staying safe through some very monthly grants to people who lost their job, or those who were in the informal sector. And last and not least, since in Morocco we had a reflection around the new development model, and we had a committee creation that was supposed to deliver a report by June 2020. So Morocco decided to extend this deadline by 6 months, so to January 2021, to deliver this report, including the impact of the pandemic on the economy and the development sector. So this was handled early the first month in parallel all of this action. And then Morocco encouraged immediately Morocco encouraged the industrial actors, mainly. Now we are moving to the involvement of the private sector. The industrial sector, Morocco is holding many big industrial in aeronautic, in automotive, in many different sectors. So Morocco encourages these industrial actors, mainly from the private sector, to figure out, of course, an economic and self-initiative action, how they can support facing the COVID-19 pandemic. That will. We knew at that time that it will last for a while. Hence, the Morocco put several incentives to encourage this industry, different industries of different area to product and to produce what is of first necessity to face the pandemic, namely the masks, the visor, the medical aprons, some medicament, and so on. And here we registered a very remarkably interesting public-private partnership that enabled Morocco to get equipped to face that first necessities without any foreign dependency, because at that time we had a lot of trouble in transportation and in international transportation and trade, and a lot of delay on deliveries. So Morocco were very independent that way, and we started producing and even producing more than our need. And this will bring us to the second point, which is the Morocco support to African country partner, different partner African country, where under the high His Majesty Mohammed VI, the first action was to initiate a reflection on the April 13 within a very pragmatic and action-driven initiative. Morocco proposed a platform within the African country aiming to share knowledge and best practices to handle and to face the pandemic. And less than 2 months later, in the same perspective where Africa is a priority for within the Morocco foreign policy, and under the High Royal Instruction, the Kingdom of Morocco started on June 19 to send support to more than 20 African countries, aiming to support them materially, but also by knowledge and by best practices. And at that time, we sent so it was around 30 different regular cargo plane for more than 20 countries, including number like 10 millions of masks, more than several millions of visier, many hundreds of thousands of chloroquine and medicament necessity, and hydroalcoholic, more than hundreds of thousands of liters, and so on. So this was the second point where Morocco supported within the South-South cooperation framework, and shared his knowledge and experience, and also produced material with more than 20 people at the same time. And it had a lot of good impact, and it was very welcome by all the brother country in Africa. And then Morocco decided, as all the other countries, to end the lockdown and to open to get back to the life. And then, of course, we had some unexpected increase of cases, and this was also handled by a very interesting strategy, but mainly from the health point of view, it was a daily fight, and it's currently getting back on a good track. And then we decided we took some decision regarding the release or the launching of the economic and the local economy, and how to face the impact of the pandemic. And then Morocco, on the top of the first fund that collected more than about $4 billion of dollars to face the pandemic, Morocco decided to allocate around $12 billion of dollars to face the post pandemic impacts, and mainly within three different areas. The first one is the generalization of health insurance and assistance for everyone in Morocco. Right now, some in the informal sector are not covered by health insurance. So this is a very high level decision in Morocco. And the second one was to allocate some in the informal sector, family and the people who are not able to who lost a job and who are not active to have some allocation for them in case of job loss. And another one is the generalization of the health insurance as well. So this was the main activity, and now within this, of course, the private and public partnership is a key, because we know that you know, public can prepare the scene and prepare the road, but it's up to the private to make it more sustainable from economic point of view. And for this, I remember some a quote that said that the capital is how to say in English. So in Arabic we said al-ra's mal jaban, is lash. So the capital cannot go where there is no economic stability. So for this, Morocco is very keen to this and working on the basis of the private sector to be safe and to invest even more.
Thank you so much. It's very interesting to hear that you know, the public-private partnership has been quite influential and instrumental in Morocco addressing the COVID-19 sort of response and recovery. And based on that, you know, you're sharing experience and knowledge and best practices with African countries, and then also you know, strategy that are really looking into and investing in, you know, the social protections, the health and the insurance. It's quite interesting to hear your story. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to turn to our next speaker, a speaker from the Republic of Sudan, Ms. Manal Omar Ali, Manager Assistant at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. She has previously worked in the Ministry of International Cooperation and now with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. And I understand throughout your career, you have been to many countries and also participated in a global and regional events. So Ms. Omar Ali, Sudan is one of the countries that have strongly reaffirmed the importance of South-South cooperation for sustainable development at the Buenos Aires conference on South-South cooperation March last year. Can you share with us what has been the role of public-private partnership in facilitating and strengthening the South-South investment between Sudan and other countries? And also tell us about you know, what are the policies, legal and regulatory frameworks that have been putting in place in Sudan to really, you know, facilitate the kind of South-South investments the countries will need. And lastly, for South-South investment decisions, what do you think the key pull and push factor to really bring the South-South investments into the regions and in your country? Thank you. Over to you.
I think she's experiencing some technical difficulties.
Okay, so while the technical difficulty is being fixed, hopefully we can fix it, because it will be really good to hear your perspective from Sudan. Can the technical team work out some, you know, magic in getting this technical problem fixed? In the meantime, I will actually turn to our next speaker, a speaker with the sector perspective. And in this, it is my great pleasure to welcome Ms. Linda Yang, Executive Chairwoman of YIN Global Board of Directors and the Global President of YIN China Center. I understand you have been the founder partner of YIN Internationals and also initiated its Global Legal Service Alliance, which is currently covering 83 countries. So Ms. Yang, China has become the biggest trade partner and external investor for many countries in the Arab region. And I understand, according to the data from the Ministry of Commerce of China, China trade volume with 22 African countries reached 224 billion in USD in 2018. So from your perspective, how is Chinese private sector engaging in South-South investments in the Arab region? What are your thoughts about the opportunities and challenges for Chinese investors in really engaging in the South-South investments, and how can private participants, private sector participants, be confident that they are engaging in contract as equal parties with the state and are not necessarily subject to arbitrary changes in terms of projects, agreement or other contractual arrangements in their ventures in southern economies? Over to you.
So thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished moderators, speakers, and participants. It's my great honor to join this panel, focus on South-South investment, public-private partnership, and perspectives. There actually have been a very close cooperation between China and Arab countries, especially under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. There are two important platforms for the cooperation between China and Arab states. One is China-Arab States Cooperation Forum, and another is China-Arab States Expo. Our President Xi said it's become very important platform for the cooperation with Arab states. Talking about the engagement from Chinese investors to the region, I would like to see that there are very big amount of investment from China to the region, especially for infrastructure. For example, in the year of 2018, there was the total amount of investment for infrastructure was about $40 billion. To enhance the condition of infrastructure, it helped to develop the local economy as well as create lots of job opportunities. I think that's the contribution to sustainable development as well as to South-South cooperation. I would like to give you a case study about an industrial park in Oman. In 2015, the government of Ningxia Autonomous Region signed a framework agreement with government of Duqm, a special economic zone in Oman, to develop an industrial park. The size of the industrial park is about 11.72 square kilometers, and the total investment is around $10 billion. There are main 9 industries in this industrial park, including petrochemical engineering, construction material, renewable energy, automotive assembling, e-business, and also it has facilities like training centers, schools, hospitals, and hotels. It creates lots of job opportunities, and also, there have been more than 17 companies launched their business in this industrial park. Of course, there are a series of incentives to attract international investors, like they have no income tax for 30 years, and they have a free flow for capital, and also you can establish 100% owned foreign owned companies. The industrial park is a good model to develop the economy in the region. There are also similar models in other countries, like an industrial park established in Egypt. I just mentioned about infrastructure and industrial park, and there are also some investment to emerging industries like 5G and cloud computing, big data, biochemistry, and agriculture. And another cooperation on agriculture, I would like to share with you another case. There's a very famous scientist named Yuan Longping, who is very reputable in agriculture. He has won many agriculture awards, like the UNESCO Science Prize, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization Medal of Honor for Food Security, and the Wolf Prize for Agricultures. He successfully developed the technology on growing rice in saline alkaline land. And Mr. Yuan Longping has a cooperation with a company in Dubai. They named the project as Green Dubai Demonstration Project. It started from January of 2018. For Dubai party, it provides land, promotion center, and big data center. And for China side, it provides equipment, technical services, and the team. After several rounds of tests, it has successfully grown rice for the first 3 hectares as demonstration. I think this successful example can be also developed to other countries, because for Arab region, lots of countries, the condition of the land is not that rich, and there are lots of land in the condition of saline alkaline land. This sort of technology can be introduced to these countries to grow more rice, to solve the problem of hunger, and also to secure the food supply chain, especially under the pandemic. You just asked about opportunities and challenges. Of course, as an emerging area, there are lots of opportunities in many industries, not only limited to infrastructure, but also to some new areas I just mentioned, especially for digital economy. And also the challenges like during the pandemic, many countries, they adjusted the policy to make it more difficult to make investment, especially for international investors. For example, there are some constraints on the maximum shares held by international investors, or there are some constraints for industries. And also for some certain countries, the political situation is not that stable. And also some problems with the rule of law. I think these are the general challenges faced by not only by Chinese investors, but by international investors. Your last question is about the confidence from the Chinese investors. I'd like to discuss this point not only from the point of view of Chinese investors, but from all international investors. Well, I think under the current situation, it's more critical than usual to attract more international investment to increase, to help to recover from the condition of post-pandemic, and to achieve the development of economy and achieve sustainable development goals of the country. They should compete for the attention of international investors through optimization of investment climate. Although there are many factors for the competitiveness of the economy in global landscape, in my opinion, sound investment policies and implementation of these policies are the critical concerns from international investors. Well, the policymakers should work out the most appropriate policy for international investors to attract more investment. For example, like what I just mentioned, to reduce regulatory and administrative constraints and modernize investment policy is also stated as a very important point in the concept note for this forum. Arab region is full of diversity in terms of political, economic, social conditions. And there are gaps in expertise and equal access to solutions and services among different countries in the region. So I think it's very important for the policymakers to cooperate with each other to share the experience, knowledge, practice in order to work out the right policy to attract foreign investment. And implementation actually is the most difficult part. It reflects the level of rule of law of the receiving country. There are many issues about implementation from investors' point of view. The key issues with great concerns are efficiency for approval on investment, obtaining working visa, importing of machines and material, the easiness on repatriation of dividends, the fairness on dispute resolution, and so on. I know that I just have 10 minutes, so thanks again for this opportunity. I would like to join you again for the discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for sharing concrete examples and also pointing out some of the opportunities and challenges and what are the kind of policies and regulatory measures that can be considered to really harness this international investments and the South-South investments for sustainable development. So thank you very much for that. I'm just wondering if Manal, Ali, will you be able to speak? Miss Arioma from Sudan?
Yeah, I think her microphone is still not working.
Okay, all right. It's a pity, but hopefully we can still.
Yeah, we are working on it.
Okay, great. Okay, so now I would like to introduce Ms. Dina Olaimi, social entrepreneur, co-founder and an executive chairperson of 3BL Associates in Kingdom of Bahrain. I understand she's also listed among Bahrain's most influential women and has served on several regional and international boards. So it's indeed very much my pleasure to have you in this discussion. So Bahrain is considered as a financial hub in the Arab region. So for that, what are the policies and regulations and legal framework from your perspective that have been putting in place to really better engage the private sector in South-South investments? And as a social entrepreneur and also a co-founder of a business, how can the framework, the new framework, help investors mitigate climate risk and also leverage opportunities to achieve the SDGs in the context of South-South cooperation, and now especially in times of COVID-19? Over to you.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's actually it's Bahrain Women's Day today, so so thank you for that warm welcome. It's a very interesting question because Bahrain has really spent quite a considerable effort over the last 10 years in particular. So I'm speaking from the entrepreneurship sector on attracting inward investment in Bahrain, both large companies as well as creating a sort of startup hub in Bahrain for the region. There hasn't been as much focus on encouraging outward investment, but I do think that that's an untapped opportunity, which I'll touch on in my comments. So one thing that the Central Bank of Bahrain has done in the last year or so is they introduced a regulatory sandbox, which allows startups and fintech firms to come to Bahrain, set up and test innovative banking and financial solutions, even crowdfunding, both Sharia compliant and conventional, under the supervision of the central bank. So what this has done, or what it was intended to do, is to attract fintech startups, from the south, but also globally, to come and set up in Bahrain. And then within the private sector, I think similar to the previous speaker, we allow 100% of foreign ownership. So there's some Gulf countries where that's not the case. So essentially the whole country is a free zone. And the government has really made an effort to provide subsidies to Bahraini companies as well as foreign companies. So there's a number of different programs, and this was pre-COVID, so they've been paused temporarily. But there's many different programs that if you set up your business in Bahrain, you have access to subsidies to train your local employees. They even pay or subsidize the wages of local employees for the first 3 years after they've graduated. And then there's various other forms of support. Now recently, and just to give you some context, when entrepreneurship first started in Bahrain, sort of as this movement that mushroomed in the region, we were seeing most entrepreneurs still thinking very inwardly. So and Bahrain is a very small market. So we are 1.2 million people, extremely small market, but we have access to Saudi Arabia, which is the largest market in the region. And most businesses were very domestic oriented. They weren't thinking about, trade or going abroad. So the last few years have really been focused on that aspect. So shifting businesses to be more export oriented, to think about regional scaling and growth. So in the last year, we've also seen the introduction of Export Bahrain, which essentially helps companies capture global market opportunities. They have different training programs, export market intelligence, and two really important programs that they are providing, which I think in terms of program infrastructure can be replicated and lend themselves to being investment oriented. So South-South and triangular investment. One is an export financing solution, which provides short-term export financing towards approved export deals and contracts at competitive rates. And essentially the financing covers the operation costs of exporting. And then the second is sort of a de-risking mechanism, which I think is important. So it's a subsidized export credit insurance, which protects Bahraini exporters against a range of risks that could arise, like a foreign buyer defaulting on payment or unable to pay. And then during the pandemic, they've also set up something called mol.bh, which is helping businesses access global markets. So this is where I think, and I know that this is already being discussed, but where a platform that not only helps, connect sellers and buyers, but also investment opportunities. And where I think there's a huge opportunity in the context of the SDGs is helping to connect investments and investors that have co-benefits. So beyond just having a financial return on investment, opportunities that will also have socioeconomic, environmental benefits. So as an example, I have a sustainability consultancy. So I've been working with a cacao company in Bahrain. And as we were looking at the inventory costs, the cost of raw materials, which are being imported, a lot of them also from the West, so not the cacao, but other materials. And we were discussing how if the business knew investment opportunities in, within the global South or to invest in a cacao plantation, for example, or to invest in agroforestry and secure raw materials. These are the kinds of opportunities that I think are not yet in the consciousness of enterprises, but I think have a lot of potential. So the biggest challenge that I see is the lack of awareness of the opportunities and the shared value that they can bring to all of the different stakeholders within the SDG framework. Followed by, I'd say the second would be the de-risking of those opportunities. So one example that comes to mind from conservation finance is the role of catalytic finance in mobilizing conservation investment. So by catalytic finance, I mean where governments or development finance institutions or even foundations will guarantee investments by saying we will absorb first loss or we will take junior equity in order to attract traditional investors. And then, of course, the other obvious one is developing the digital infrastructure, but that's, I'm sure, going to be covered in great length tomorrow. So to answer your second question, I think that for me, what's interesting is, we talk a lot about needing to close this 2.5 trillion annual investment gap to achieve the SDGs. And we keep looking to the private sector and public-private partnerships. So one methodology and framework that we developed is called public-planet partnerships. And it was really intended as a way to reframe the way that we think about nature, not just as something to protect, but really as our biggest social and economic partner. So in terms of trade and investment, if we think of natural capital as being upwards of $125 to $145 trillion in value, and of course we really don't know because nature is non-linear in growth, so it's very difficult to quantify. But global GDP in 2019 was 142 trillion. So, we shouldn't just look to the private sector, but also to public-planet partnerships. And it really fits in with enabling what we've seen, recently with more of an emphasis within the UN on nature-based solutions. But we've also come across, a lot of humble innovators that have worked with nature as an ally in other ways. So not just with ecosystems, but also with species and interspecies collaborations. So one of them is Tech, which is a company that partners with bacteria to convert carbon into sustainable fuel. Another is biodiversity, which partners with bees to collect biodiversity data. So bees are able to collect 4 billion data points in an area covering 700 football fields. But my favorite, and I think the one that has a lot of potential in an investment context is trees. Simply because of their sheer versatility and application to so many different contexts. So if there is a business that is investing in hospitals or healthcare facilities, whether it's attracting inwards or going outwards and investing abroad, there are opportunities to leverage and invest in reforestation or afforestation while improving healthcare outcomes. So in the UK, the National Health Service estimates that green spaces could save them about £2.1 billion in healthcare costs. If we're looking at investing in travel and the hospitality sector, McKinsey recently released a report in September that doubling nature conservation could create or safeguard up to 33 million jobs and add up to 470 billion in GDP from ecotourism. Each hectare of mangroves actually creates around $1,000 in recreation and tourism annually. as well as other benefits like water and air purification, coastal protection, even for public sector institutional investors like sovereign wealth funds or pension funds. We've recently been seeing debt for climate swaps. So the Seychelles converted 22 million in foreign debt into investment in marine conservation. But at the end of the day, carbon is carbon, you know, it has no borders. So I think there's an opportunity for countries to invest in, and some of the countries in the Gulf are already doing this, to invest in food security and agriculture and agroforestry abroad, but, you know, potentially also leverage this as a form of debt for climate swaps. So I'm not sure if I'm over time, but I think I'll pause and leave the rest of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really also interesting to hear that regulatory frameworks, the policies, programs, you know, have really facilitated the public-private partnerships and also really bringing in, you know, a different perspective into looking at investments beyond just the financial return, but really bringing in the social, economic, and environment and nature into, you know, the figuring out about, you know, the South's investments and the investments with regard to, you know, what we need to be actually really investing for future, not just the current sort of a time. So thank you so much for sharing that thought with us. I understand, Manal Ali, I think your microphone is fixed now, and hopefully. So I will actually like to turn to Ms. Manal Omar Ali, Manager Assistant at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning from the Sudan. And my questions to you is that, you know, can you share with us what has been the role of public-private partnership in facilitating and strengthening the South-South investments between Sudan and other countries? And, you know, what are the policy, regulatory frameworks or legal frameworks that have been put in place in Sudan to facilitate that? And, you know, from a South-South investment decision point, what's your thoughts about the key pull and push factor in terms of investment, you know, between countries? Over to you. Sorry, I was told that I think your microphone was working now, but unfortunately, I still don't, we're not able to hear you yet. Yeah, we're not able to hear. Rafael, I guess we'll still have to work on that. But in the meantime, I'm so sorry, I think we will have to come back when the technical problem is fixed. And then turn them to a speaker from financial institutions. I think, you know, Lena Olaimi had talked about some of the policies and programs that are really looking at, you know, around the investments in the banking sector, financial sectors, and so on. So I think it's really good to actually get them to talk about a banking sector. You know, for this, I would like to introduce Dr. Ali Adnan Ibrahim. He is the first Vice President and Head of Sustainability and Social Responsibility at Al Baraka Banking Group in Bahrain, which is the world, I understand, which is the world's largest Islamic banking network. He's also a co-chairperson of Sustainability Working Group of General Council of Islamic Bank and Financial Institution, a chairperson of Sustainable Development Committee of Banking Association, Bahrain Association of Banks, a chairperson of Global Islamic and Sustainable Think Tank Center, and a member of Sustainable Financing Working Group of the International Institute of Finance. So Dr. Ibrahim, as a representative from the banking sector, how does your bank engage in South-South investments with the other Arab countries? Can you share with us your experience or of your bank in supporting financing projects that are facilitating the South-South investments in the Arab regions. And then from your perspective, what do you see as an opportunities and challenges? And maybe lastly, how does the bank incentivize increased South-South investment, both from public and private investors, particularly in unlocking opportunity in low-income or least developed country? Over to you.
Thank you so very much, thank you so very much for the organizers for organizing this very important workshop, and very warm good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to dignitaries and the audience and my fellow speakers. I've really enjoyed the talks from my fellow speakers, Mr. Nuruddin, Ms. Linda, and Ms. Lina. And I think they all come back to some very unique common points in terms of collaboration, in terms of nature, in terms of the role of the regulation and the role of the public and private partnership. And I think in that spirit, that's very well recognized spirit in which now the financial services sector, particularly, I would not talk about the private sector in general, but I think rather focus on the financial services sector. So this sector is increasingly becoming more and more aware of the environmental challenges and their role to fix some of the social inequalities and economic inequalities, and how the role of banks should be in future in terms of providing opportunities for businesses, for private sector in general, in terms of moving towards the SDG transformation, if I may. So I think it has taken a little bit of time for the financial services sector to align itself or thinking to align itself with the SDGs as a transformation tool. But I think we have seen a massive progress in the past 2 years. On the first hand, you will see there's a massive surge in green bonds issuance across the globe. On the other hand, we see the banks are increasingly developing their asset base in terms of the financing for the renewable sector. And I think it is very clearly no more just a moral imperative. It is a business case, and it's a very strong business case in terms of what banks can do to future-proof themselves. And I think that's where the drive is coming from. So connecting it with our group, we have 12 subsidiaries in 17 different countries across the globe, and we are present almost in every country in North Africa, and then in South Africa, and then almost every country in the Levant region, and then we have presence in Pakistan and Turkey as well. So if we consider ourselves a group which is present in 3 continents, what opportunities we see, it is very interesting. I'll touch upon some of this in the second question, but I think most importantly, and Lina also touched upon this on the export credit part, but I think we look at it as an opportunity to enhance trade across the countries where we are present. And there are, if we look at the numbers of the cross-country trade in where we are present, we are just tapping a fraction of that. So although before COVID, our trade finance across the group banks was just over $1 billion. And that is something that we are increasingly working to enhance so much that we should be the bank of choice for trade finance in those countries because of the linkages that we have. And that is one strategy we are doing. And most of the trade finance is happening with the SME sector and the corporate sector. And that's where most of the job, they are the big employers in the job market. And that's how we are looking to impact the economy through trade finance with the across the globe collaboration. that is one part. The other part is, as you see, the banks are quite sophisticated in terms of how they are regulated. They are regulated with global regulation, local regulation. They have a regulation from the board of directors supervision, and then they have being an Islamic bank, we have another layer, which is the Sharia board supervision. So 4 layers, and it's a very sophisticated set of regulation that we have. So in terms of what we can do to impact is we really have to be very, very careful. We have to think it through as to what we are looking to do. We have to align the shareholders' aspirations. We have to align the regulatory aspirations. At the same time, we have to align ourselves with the aspirations being an Islamic bank, that we really want to play a meaningful and impactful role in the economy. So in September, when in 2015, when the SDGs were announced, we went to the drawing board and we said we definitely want to align ourselves with the SDGs. And in November 2015, we announced our aspiration, our goals. We called it Al Baraka goals, and which was creating jobs, financing healthcare, financing education, and financing sustainable energy. And immediately after that, we invited our subsidiaries to build up next 5-year targets on these 4 goals. And then we consolidated all the numbers, and we came up with some humble numbers, which is in the global scheme of things is not huge, but nobody had done that before. So we wanted to learn with experience in a very careful way. So we came up with $635 million of numbers for the first 5 years without the sustainable energy part. And then we started measuring every year that how our subsidiaries are doing every year. Are they meeting their financing target? And I want to emphasize that this is not the traditional way of doing sustainability, which is CSR. This was linking this was to align the portfolio of financing operations with the SDGs. So this was a very unique experience for us, and we have learned a lot. And then 2 years ago, we added the sustainable energy target, and so our total pledge came down to $822 million. And we just published our 2019 report of sustainability and impact, and very pleased to share with all of you that we have met the SDG financing or Al Baraka goals targets 1 year ahead of time. And right now we are working on 2021 to 2025 targets. Hopefully we'll increase the financing amount, we'll increase some of the sectors that we'll be focusing more on. So the idea is to align our financing operations, which is our core business, with the SDGs. So SDGs have provided us an opportunity to realign our portfolio much more meaningfully and much more impactfully, because we are a 12,000 strong workforce, and there is so much more jobs that we can create. But I think that the real opportunity for us to impact is not creating jobs within our institution, but through our financing. So that's where your third question is what tools that we are using. That what we are deploying is when the relationship managers, they look at So when the relationship managers work with the customers, they look at their credit and risk profiles. And along with that, they try to get the information about what social value, what sustainability value they are going to create for the community. And based on that, the credit committees, they look at they rank the potential customers accordingly, because credit and risk are being equal. So the preference is given to the ones who are creating more permanent jobs, who are aligned with more sustainable energy, who are aligned with more education and healthcare and projects. So this way, we are gradually moving towards aligning our total portfolio on the theme and spirit of sustainable development goals. So and I think we are not the only institution now with the help of and in terms of public-private spirit, we were very fortunate to get the partnership with UNDP at global level. So the idea was that our financing teams should get the training on sustainable development goals in terms of how a relationship manager should look at the risk in terms of environment, and how a relationship manager should look at the evaluation of a project which is supposed to be financed sustainably. So, and first we were fortunate to get a partnership with UNDP. Later on, we also were fortunate to have the partnership with UNEP, and now also with UNEP-FI. So I think UNEP Finance Initiative's Principles of Responsible Banking are looking to do exactly the same thing at a global level. So UNEP-FI's signatories already are in excess of, they have the asset base of in excess of $43 trillion. So the movement of how banks can be more impactful and sustainable in terms of financing operations has already gone beyond, already in trillions. And there is enough money in the system already. If you look at the assets under management of the banks without any filters, it's in excess of it's $89 trillion already, and which is almost equal to the global GDP. So, and if you look at the financial market numbers and the derivatives market numbers, there is huge value and massive wealth available in the system. It's just about the realignment. And I think that movement is happening not only by the banks, but at the same time, if you see the regulators are also now very keen. And so much so that if you look at only the climate finance part, in the climate finance part, the regulators are much more aggressive in terms of encouraging the licensees to do their stress testing. Bank of England, for instance, is going to do the stress testing of their financial services sector next year. So, so disclosure in the financial services sector is becoming more and more common. TCFD is one thing, then the reporting frameworks are merging. The SASB and GRI are working with the carbon accounting. So carbon accounting is becoming, so the decarbonization of the financial services market is massive, in massive momentum. So I think in bits and pieces, you will see there is a huge progress that is happening, and most importantly, there is the network of greening the financial system, NGFS, which is an initiative of the Central Bank of France. Now over 72 central banks are part of it, and what they are doing is they are becoming the new Basel for sustainable finance. And I think it's just a question of time that the carbon disclosure is going to be mandatory for the banks. It's just a question of time that by 2030 there would be hardly any asset which would not be measured for ESG. So, and I think the future is only looking brighter and brighter. So I stop here and for the interest of time, and look forward to answering any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really like the fact that, you said no more imperative, moral imperative. It is actually a business case to actually do a sustainable and good business. And then for that, it's very encouraging, the bank like you is already really embracing the SDGs and using that goal to really benchmark, in terms of the investment returns, in terms of, the performance of your portfolio. So very much appreciating for a very good, inspirational sort of sharing of experience. So thank you so much. I think now I actually would like to turn to Mr. Mohammed Osman, the chairman of International Council for Small Business, because I think we've been talking about, sustainable business, it's the importance of, the private sector, financing sector, really, making sure that the domestic employment and there is an inclusive growth. And then, your organization will represent the small, medium enterprise. And I think it's very important to have your perspective, today. So Mr. Mohammed Osman, Chairman of the International Council for Small Business, which is the world oldest and largest non-profit organization devoted to small business development internationally. I understand you have also been the managing director of Global Entrepreneurship Network in Egypt, and is also a project management and strategy advisor for several governments and private sector or private organizations in Egypt. So, Mr. Osman, SME contribution to GDP in Arab country, I understand ranges from, between 4% to 40%. And this actually reflects that there is a greater and larger role for SME in some countries, but at the same time, the SME is already playing a significant role in other countries. And then the development of a vibrant SME sector is crucial for achieving higher and more inclusive private sector-led growth. So question to you, what are the opportunities and challenges for small medium enterprises to engage in South-South investment through public-private partnership in the Arab region? What can be done more to maximize the role of the public-private partnership to facilitate the increased SME engagement in such an investments? And then also, how can countries in the Arab region best ensure that there is a legal and institutional factors that are really not necessarily deterring the PPP and their engagement in South-South investments in a way that can really promote and bring the small medium enterprises? And lastly, how can the small medium enterprise secure their investment when faced with domestically insufficient financing, currently, particularly now with the COVID, financial crisis that are impacting a number of financing sectors. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yoko. And first of all, I'd like to thank UNDP Kingdom of Bahrain and the UN Office for South-South Cooperation for organizing this very timely workshop. Obviously, COVID-19 has hit small business owners globally in a very, very aggressive way. No one would have imagined the standstill economies have gone through. And it's our role to now support all small and medium enterprise owners in the South-South or in all around the world, or in even the Arab world, to make them come back and return to normal economic activity. So to start with, first of all, I'd like to say that despite that many of us think there are a lot fewer startups and small and medium enterprises than there used to be. In the Arab world, 90% of the backbone of the local economies is built around micro, small, and medium enterprises. Startups, according to Brookings Institute in 2019, there's a sharp decline in startups across all industries globally. And this pattern has been continuing over the last decade. Despite the buzz around entrepreneurship and small and medium enterprise development, there still is a problem for all of us, because as the percentage of startups grows smaller and smaller, the true economic growth engine becomes less significant. As per the United Nations in 2015, they said that in order to generate 45 million new jobs each year for new entrants to the labor market, and to provide jobs for those who have lost their jobs due to financial or economic crisis, the world must create 600 million jobs by 2030. Obviously, these numbers have significantly increased or even doubled due to COVID-19. One segment that can benefit from the public-private partnership includes collaboration between startups and regional and local governments. To fuel innovation to commercialize R&D, we need to make startups a lot more viable. The creation of public-private venture capital funds, or SME development funds, can contribute to the localization of technology and the deepening of industrial revolution within the South-South countries. New tech startups globally tend to accept funding from PPPs. This is a model adopted greatly and aggressively in North America. However, resource-strapped companies often look for government support programs to provide these resources, and these companies promise job creation and economic growth in return. The challenge remains that PPPs often evolve more around launching new businesses rather than sustaining those companies or even scaling them in the long term. We need to create a South-South or Pan-Arab PPP funds to help strategically support startups to grow gracefully. These funds should provide qualified entrepreneurs, and I underline the word qualified, access to capital and business guidance. And business guidance is very, very important. This business guidance can be in areas such as programming, coding, cybersecurity, commercial assistance, as well as business development services. Exports within South-South countries and the population within these countries is great and a big market which can open lots of opportunities for entrepreneurs. A previous speaker has spoken about the change happening in the Kingdom of Bahrain and how it's becoming a global startup destination. As she has mentioned rightly, Bahrain is a small market, but the potential of exporting and working abroad and in many other countries is great. So it's important to create a support ecosystem around startups and small and medium enterprise that will ensure that the owner of this business receives the correct assistance to be able to scale. Helping startups grow into healthy, mature companies over the long run is much more sustainable than merely fostering them through early stages, then releasing them to the wild where failure can meet them and become a result. What PPP can help achieve is create talent. Growing sustainable companies requires a well-rounded workforce. PPPs can offer a way to build healthier talent pipelines, and these pipelines can be used to support these startups or different types of companies. PPPs can also be used to support green startups, which the world really requires currently. Finally, ICSB would like to call on all the partners and stakeholders around the table today to create PPP funds and to create funds of funds to invest in healthcare, education, technology, and industrial startups. We also encourage the creation of capacity building global initiatives, teaching future skills. The fourth industrial revolution is around the corner. It's among us actually. So skills such as AI, coding, data analytics are the ABCs of tomorrow. In this, ICSB has created what we call the knowledge hubs. Knowledge hubs are a model which we encourage people to adopt, as we have launched over 15 knowledge hubs across 5 continents since June of this year. People can access more information on our knowledge hubs through our website, icsb.org. Finally, our call for action cannot be complete without the promotion of PPP investments in women-led companies. We believe that women-led companies are a key to aligning with the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, where we finally would like to say that we will leave no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for bringing in the gender perspective. I think we haven't actually touched on that, so it's very nice to hear that quite a lot of efforts and initiatives that have been undertaken, from your institution, really looking at bringing the capacities, the talents, and then not just a startup, but really making sure the startup is actually taking a scale. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective. I do understand that Ms. Mana and Ali Omar, I think your microphone is now working. Can you try?
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now, please?
Yes, great.
Is it okay?
Yes, thank you so much. It's nice to hear your voice.
Okay. Finally.
So I have already posed your questions, or do you want me to repeat, or can I just give you a floor?
No. Yeah, I know the questions. Yeah, okay. I have read it well. Okay.
Great.
Okay, but as you know, that I prepared myself in Arabic, as I told you. So I believe there is an interpretation. Okay. السلام عليكم الحضور الكريم.
Hello everyone. In the beginning, I want to thank everybody who organized this workshop. In this difficult situation that is happening in all countries, as we know that COVID affected a lot of industries and a lot of sectors. And despite all of that, I thank you for organizing this workshop. In the beginning, I would like to start with talking There is no doubt that the partnership between the public and private sectors is considered an advanced model for business activities that help to increase private sector investments.
العام والخاص في السودان دورها الفعال في تعزيز دور تعاون جنوب.
There is no doubt that the partnership between the public and private sectors is considered an advanced model for business activities that help to increase private sector investments, especially when the national economy is operating in its full operational capabilities in the economic field. I would like to also talk about FAO and the program, the joint South-South cooperation program between FAO and China, which supports the National Agricultural Investment Plan in Sudan, which addresses the challenges of food security, malnutrition, and poverty in areas of fragility by supporting and assisting some groups. These are some examples. They're not all the examples, but these are some of them.
Can you hear me, please? You can hear me very well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I can continue?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. بالنسبة للسؤال بتاع ما هي العوامل التي تدفع تعاون جنوب
As for the conditions for the South cooperation, some of them are the national sovereignty and independence, mutual accountability and transparency, equality, and there are a lot of challenges that could be in the way of cooperation in Sudan. There are no policy stability in Sudan, and there is no rational political leadership that supports the South cooperation. And there is a lack of awareness, and there is instability of growth in Sudan due to the challenges and due to the conflict that is happening in Sudan currently.
الحاجة الثانية كلنا عارفين إن إحنا في السودان عندنا ظروف استثنائية في بلدنا اللي هي زي ما كنا عارفين إنه هو رغم إن السودان قطر غني بالموارد الطبيعية والثروات الزراعية والحيوانية والمعدنية وإضافة إلى التنوع البيئي، لكن رغم ذلك بيواجه تحديات اقتصادية اجتماعية وسياسية كبيرة جدا ساهمت فيها عوامل عدة. عندنا المشكلة بتاعت الحروبات الأهلية والصراعات الداخلية، التصحر، الفيضانات إلى آخره. كمان عندنا النزاعات والصراعات السياسية في الدول المجاورة، دي أفرزت تدفق أعداد هائلة من اللاجئين والمهاجرين غير الشرعيين. وأهم فاكتورز ممكن يكون هو بالنسبة لنا يعني بولس فاكتور هي العقوبات الاقتصادية ووضع السودان من الدول الراعية للإرهاب، دي كانت برضو مشكلة كبيرة بالنسبة لنا. دي أفرزت أوضاع إنسانية صعبة ومتردية في المناطق المتأثرة بالحرب، بالإضافة إلى الحصار الاقتصادي. ده كله ساهم في حجب العمل التنموي في البلاد. وكذلك كان من المنظمات كلها كانت مركزة على العمل الإنساني والبرامج الإسعافية rather than العمل التنموي أو الdevelopment work. كل الحاجات دي أفرزت الظروف المذكورة دي كلها واقع مريرا أدى إلى كلنا زي ما كلنا عارفين قيام ثورة ديسمبر المجيدة وإلى تشكيل الحكومة الانتقالية الحالية. في مشكلة ثانية إنه كل الانترناشونال اورجانيزيشنز وكل البرامج اللي ممكن توقع مع أي انترناشونال.
What is happening?
Sorry.
Yeah, I think the interpretation from Arabic to English is not really working.
Oh, hello. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Fatima, your microphone is muted. Can you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
Who is Fatima? Manal, please.
Please, Manal, go ahead.
So sorry. What do you mean? What do you need me to do?
Sorry, I'm saying Khalil is interpreting right now.
Okay. Please, Manal, go ahead.
Okay. The interpretation work now?
Yes, you can continue. Yes, you can continue.
Hello?
Yes, it's working.
Okay. بالنسبة لمشاركة السودان في مجال تعاون جنوب.
We participate in South cooperation in the Sudan, despite the problems and the conflict. We have a delegation who visited us from FAO. They visited the Sudan. And we have cooperation with the FAO program in 2017. Lots of meetings were conducted in agriculture and the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Wealth, and also Ministry of Cooperation and Environment. Also Chinese-Sudanese cooperation. We had a program for 2 years with China. In January 2018, an expert from South cooperation visited the Sudan. Coordination was taken then. And this expert stayed for 3 months. And there was a unit for this South cooperation with the Sudan. The expert focused on the following duties: cooperation, strategies, in coordination with the Ministry of Finance with the Sudan. This expert had a SWOT analysis. He found what are the strengths and the weaknesses that we have encountered. And they discussed the performance in the Sudan. Also, we have the legal framework as well to support this PPP, or partnership between the public and private sectors. The Ministry of Finance supported this PPP. And the infrastructure was supported and the gaps were bridged. So companies finance, private sector finances the public projects. And this supports the financing. So the private sector will commission these projects for 20 years.
Sorry, because I'm talking very quickly because of the time.
If you could start wrapping up, that would be very good. Thank you.
Okay. And then الشركات دي تقوم بتشغيل لفترة تعاقدية.
The private sector will commission these projects for 20 years.
Did I lose Mr. Omar?
Yes, I'm coming. Sorry. زي ما قلت إنه الشركات القطاع
The private sector commissions these projects for 20 years. Following the 20 years, these projects go to the government, to the public sector. Also, in 2019, there is partnership between private and public sectors. Private sectors are given guarantees for projects, and they are attracting these private sector players in order to finance these projects. And the government also coordinates with the private sector. And there is win-win situation for both private and public sectors. Also, Ministry of Finance of the Sudan focuses on the partnerships between private and public sectors in infrastructure, particularly in the technical advice and cooperation. There is a unit which conducted a workshop for 4 days. It's a partnership between both private and public sectors, and how to attract local expertise and talents.
Okay, Mr. Omar, thank you very much. I think it's great that you are finally able to actually, get the microphone fixed.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So we have now heard perspective from government, private sector, entrepreneurs, private sector in terms of the perspective from banking sectors and the small medium enterprise. So now I'd like to turn to a speaker that can share perspective of international financial institutions. My pleasure to welcome Mr. Ahmed Farouk Tiken, Senior Technical Cooperation Coordinator from the Reverse Linkages Country Strategy Cooperation Department of the Islamic Development Bank. So, Mr. Farouk Tiken, Islamic Development Bank has, I understand, designed the reverse linkages as a technical cooperation mechanisms where I believe it is a unique modality that actually puts the solidarity-based cooperation ahead of finance. So what are the efforts like this, that Islamic Development Bank is undertaken to support Arab countries to engage in South-South investments, especially in low-income and least developed countries, and what criteria does Islamic Development Bank put in place to maximize the impact of the investments in the SDGs? You have maximum 10 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yuko. I'll do my best to stay within the time. Distinguished guests, fellow speakers, dear colleagues, greetings to all of you. I'd like to begin by thanking the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain, the UNDP and the UN Office for South-South Cooperation for inviting us to be a part of this event and to share how the Islamic Development Bank is contributing to South-South cooperation and investments in the Arab region to support the achievement of the SDGs. I will begin my remarks with a bit of an overview about the bank and then expand on our work in the area of promoting South-South cooperation and investments in the Arab region and beyond. As you know, the Islamic Development Bank Group is a South-South multilateral development finance institution established more than 40 years ago with the objectives of fostering inclusive economic development and social progress in its 57 member countries. As the main financial institution among the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Institutions, the Islamic Development Bank has been spearheading a Sharia-compliant South-South development assistance model since its inception. In doing our work, we have been using a mix of Islamic finance instruments, which are well tailored to meet the nature of various SDGs. Through various financial tools rooted in the principles of Islamic finance, we have been able to finance more than 8,000 development interventions worth over $130 billion since our founding, spread across sectors such as infrastructure, health, education, agriculture, and food security, to name just a few areas. One of the ways in which the Islamic Development Bank has promoted South-South and triangular cooperation is our Technical Cooperation Program, which was initiated in 1983. This program has been supporting the exchange of expertise and resources through the short-term modalities such as study visits, expert assignments, and training events. The main aim of this program has been to develop the capacity in our member countries, in addition to enhancing cooperation based on solidarity. Since its inception up to the end of 2020, up to the end of this year, around more than 2,500 operations have been undertaken for an amount exceeding $60 million. Our long-standing experience in South-South cooperation has led us to evaluate our approaches and conceptualize better ways of doing business. This process of reflection led us to formulate a new approach that you also referred to, Ms. Yuko, that we call reverse linkage. We define reverse linkage as an enhanced technical cooperation mechanism enabled by the bank, whereby member countries exchange their knowledge, expertise, technology, and resources to develop their capacities and devise solutions for their autonomous development. And this can be the private sector, the public sector, and the third sector in our member countries. Since the introduction of this mechanism in 2014, we have developed a portfolio of over 30 projects worth over $130 million, including our financial contribution, as well as what we mobilize from partners. Through these projects, we have been able to connect more than 30 member countries, all the way from Suriname in the west to Indonesia in the east, to facilitate the exchange of expertise, technology, and resources in order to solve real development challenges. Reverse linkage has proven to be a very versatile tool, which allows us to work in a variety of sectors, some of which includes agriculture and food security, renewable energy, health, education, and water resources management, to name just a few. South-South cooperation initiatives are usually funded through grants as well as through in-kind resources. This was also the case with reverse linkage in the early stages. However, we managed to achieve a breakthrough in this traditional approach, and now we provide loans when projects are large scale and recipient countries accept to take loans. This is particularly useful when we mainstream reverse linkage as a component of large-scale development projects. As an example, we are supporting some sub-Saharan member countries in improving access to electricity in rural areas through Moroccan expertise and renewable energy technologies. The equipment in these projects are quite expensive and cannot be procured by using grant resources alone. So we are able to provide loans for the equipment while we use the grants for the exchange of expertise and know-how with a view to enhance capacity. Traditionally speaking, many of our reverse linkage projects, which were developed during the pilot phase, have mostly been with partners from the public sector. But since we always wanted to engage the private sector through reverse linkage, we left ample room in our reverse linkage policy in this regard. This is an important element to consider when we speak about South-South investments across the Arab states, as well as in other regions, in order to achieve the SDGs, because private sector has significant resources, both in technical and financial terms, for solving development challenges. In 2019, the bank for the first time opened a new avenue of collaboration with the private sector by leveraging reverse linkage, which culminated into the establishment of funding mechanisms with a total financial contribution of $45 million from member countries. The bank signed an agreement with an energy sector private company in Malaysia, for example, to set up a $30 million reverse linkage fund that provides financial and technical resources to help IDME member countries to establish vocational training centers in the oil and gas sector that would boost employment, among other benefits. During the same year, the bank also signed another agreement with a private equity management company, also based in Malaysia, to allocate $15 million to a reverse linkage fund, which will support SMEs interested in participating in the reverse linkage activities and as well as in advancing their business opportunities. This year, we're pleased to report that the bank continued in its engagement with the private sector, especially given the COVID-19 crisis, and we have received pledges of up to $88.6 million for reverse linkage interventions. A noteworthy highlight is the expansion of the network of developers outside the member countries, where the bank partnered with the private sector from Singapore for the first time. One example of how these partnerships with the private sector would benefit the member countries is seen in our recently approved reverse linkage project for Jordan, which will receive expertise and technology transfer from a Singaporean company for producing N95 masks, for instance. This transfer will help Jordan become self-sufficient in producing much needed personal protective equipment and also export them to other countries. Using these experiences, the bank is now preparing operational guidelines on engaging the private sector through reverse linkage, which will allow us to expand and scale up these types of partnerships and benefit our member countries from the resources and technical know-how of the private sector for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Another initiative that I would like to share with you, which helps to strengthen cross-border investments across our member countries, including the Arab states, is our Investment Promotion Technical Assistance Program. This initiative was established in 2005, and its objective is to help unlock the developmental potential of the IDB member countries through a comprehensive and integrated program of foreign investment promotion. Its focus areas include institutional capacity development, sharing best practices, information dissemination on investment opportunities, needs assessment studies, and other tools which help boost promotion of cross-border investments. The program is implemented through various tools such as full-fledged technical assistance projects to boost investment promotion, short-term country promotion support programs, reverse linkage interventions, transferring skills and know-how from successful models in IDB member countries to others, and conducting training programs and investment forums which provide the necessary platforms for investment promotion professionals to network and share good practices. Last but not least, I would like to conclude my remarks by sharing one of the latest partnership initiatives that we have developed in cooperation with the UN Office for South-South Cooperation and the Office of the UN Special Advisor of the Secretary General, which is the Arab States South-South and Triangular Cooperation Initiative, launched in October this year on the sidelines of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly. Through this initiative, we aim to support the Arab states to showcase their experience and achievements in addressing their national development challenges and contributing to the SDGs through South-South and Triangular Cooperation. This will be done through a series of webinars over the course of next year, and we will support the creation of knowledge products to show how the Arab countries are partnering among themselves, as well as with other countries from the South in advancing their development goals. We believe that South-South cooperation, in addition to its role in achieving SDG 17, is a cross-cutting mechanism which can effectively contribute to all the SDGs, be it in relation to solving poverty and hunger, improving health and education, enhancing infrastructure, and helping the planet heal through projects for solving climate change. In this respect, IDB will continue to mainstream South-South cooperation through reverse linkage mechanism and other tools in as many of its operations as possible. In addition to supporting the achievement of the SDGs, we're confident this approach will also help us strengthen solidarity-based partnerships among our member countries, as well as with countries from the South. With this final point, I'd like to end my remarks with many thanks to the organizers again, and I look forward to the discussions where I'm happy to answer more questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for sharing. I think the reverse sort of a linkage is now becoming much more integral part of the investments and the financial operation, which I think is really, really encouraging. So thank you very much for sharing, and also sharing about the partnership. That will be really cultivating a lot of knowledge sharing. So thank you so much for that. Last but not least, I have the honor to welcome Dr. Ashraf Al-Labi, I'm sorry for mispronunciation, advisor to the Arab Planning Institute in Kuwait and the National Planning Institute in Egypt. I understand you have held quite a number of high-level positions, including the Minister of Planning and International Cooperation, also a Minister of Planning, Monitoring and Administration Reform in Egypt. I think you are currently a member of the Board of Directors of Central Bank of Egypt and the Secretary General of the Arab Society of Economic Research. So I like to pose two questions to you, and maybe bring you more of the think tank and academic perspective because of your research interest. How can South-South investment agreements be tailored to specifically address the development dimension and achieve the economic development goal in the Arab region at the same time? I also understand it is known that the Arab region is probably the least regionally integrated regions in comparison with the others. What can be done to strengthen the regional integration efforts to improve the South-South investments in the region? Over to you.
شكرا جزيلا يعني سعيد جدا ان انا اكون مع حضراتكم.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm from the Arab Planning Institute.
هذه الورشه الهامه احنا الحقيقه في المعهد العربي.
We in the Arab Planning Institute.
كبير من التقارير والدراسات.
We have studies and reports on our website.
سواء اليوم أو أمس.
Whether today or yesterday or tomorrow, I invite you all to see our website, the Arab International Planning Institute. We in the Institute have studies and conclusions, and we agree on these conclusions and interventions. Arab countries are not homogeneous, as you know. We have 3 or 4 heterogeneous groups. We have traditional classification based on income, such as World Bank classification, high income, low income. And also we have lots of Arab countries which are having problems on security issues. So we have the middle income, low income, least developed countries, and others. There are economic problems that Arab countries encounter, and we couldn't combat or rectify. As you know, oil and is the main issue of product, which controls export, investment in most Arab countries. This is reflected and caused lots of problems, such as deficit in budget and in countries. Even oil countries are having a deficit in their balances. Moreover, we have this deficit in the Arab countries, even the rich Gulf countries. We also find that even Gulf countries having problems with their balances. There is a financing gap or financing gap. This gap, unfortunately, is getting greater and greater in the Arab region. This is more severe, particularly when COVID-19 started. This financing gap needs to be financed or bridged. This is a challenge that we encounter in the agenda, whether in sustainable development or other development issues. How we can finance and bridge this financing gap, which is getting large, bigger and bigger. Some countries started to borrow more, which is an easy issue, by borrowing internally and externally, or reforms, having some reforms, and making better investment environment, and supporting private sector wages or salaries. As a result, there is more debt in the most Arab countries, particularly the middle income countries, where GDP in such countries is 60 to 80, and even 150%, 60 to 80%, or even up to 150%. Therefore, the issue is sustainability issue has become with no meaning, I think. We are talking about sustainability, and but we are always borrowing now. How can we have other financing resources, such as the opportunity of partnership between both public and private sector, PPP, which is a good example of partnership for financing. The public sector plays an important role. And the private sector, on the other hand, is not that mature enough to be able to work uniquely in financing. Therefore, partnership between public and private sector is very suitable in our Arab countries. However, unfortunately, about $3 trillion investment in projects, both public and private sectors, in the infrastructure in the past 2 decades. $3 trillion were only $100 billion. So the environment of investment priority is less. And this is a challenge at the same time. And at the same time, it's an opportunity. So it's a challenge and opportunity at the same time. We can benefit from these investments in the international market. Also, if we look at the diversification of investments, $100 million, most of them, 2/3 of this investment, 66% of these investments is in 3 Arab countries only: Morocco, Egypt, and Algeria. Only 3 Arab countries. 2/3 of these investments are in the infrastructure. Also, 90% of these investments is in 2 sectors: energy and telecommunications. Therefore, it's important to see that in the past decades, we witnessed lots of efforts exerted of reform in the Arab region. However, these efforts, it was an ad hoc issue. It wasn't within a framework which is comprehensive or strategic one. It was an ad hoc one. It didn't take into consideration the dimensions of sustainable development, social, economic, and environmental. However, the Arab countries succeeded in some international initiatives, regionally and internationally, to have some milestones and achievements, but not enough to achieve the aspirations of the Arab people, to achieve sustainable development, which is real. How can we use such agreements to serve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals in South countries, particularly in the Arab region, And how can we have a regional integration economically in the Arab region? We, as a matter of fact, can call it requisite conditions. First, to have a security stability in the Arab countries. It is an important thing. We can't talk about investment without security. We can't talk about South cooperation without having reinstatement of security and stability in the Arab region. Also, financial reinstatement. We need stability of exchange. How can we invest if we can't have exchange? What prices of exchange we can base? If there is deficit and there is more debt, how can we work and invest? True, some Arab countries recently have exerted good efforts in this regard by having partnership with International Fund, Monetary Fund, with reform. Also having taxes, imposing taxes, and the value-added tax. All these issues, in many cases, has not resulted in a major reform. Again, I would like to reiterate that we need an environment which is good for investment in the private sector. We have SMEs which are very successful in the Arab region. First, the security is important, political settlement, stability is important, will lead to reforms. We need more governance, more transparency, more legislations in order to have investment. Also, agreements for investment should be geared towards priorities to be in line with national agendas and priorities. Strategic planning is very important. My background is planning. I work in the Planning Institute. Therefore, such initiatives and agendas for sustainable development and 2030 reinstate the importance of strategic planning. When we talk about investment, we need to focus on environmental, social, and economic development. We need samples to ensure goals. The goals that we have in our national plans are contradictory and they conflict, they are paradoxical. Therefore, for example, we could have problems with climate change in some, if we have some industries. Therefore, we need performance indicators. These indicators should be precise, clear, and can evaluate what can be achieved, and there should be accountability, and everyone must be accountable in his duties. Again, we need reforms. As a matter of fact, we have lots of investment and lots of abilities in the Arab region. However, that we don't have bankable projects. We need projects which are bankable. When we have financing from Islamic banks or Arab funds or World Bank, they ask us about the projects. Many times our projects, although they are investment, they are not developed, and we cannot get financing for them. Moreover, the investment agreements should address the localization of sustainable SDGs. There are lots of contradictions in the Arab regions and in areas. They should serve priorities. They should serve diversification, transformation, production.
Thank you.
Finally, in conclusion, integration and enhancing integration should be regional and should be based on the interest of, we should have integration. What we need is interest language, benefit language, and to ensure that there is winning in our investment. And to focus on the private sector and public sector for integration regionally. I think COVID-19 helps us to not to talk individually, but to talk about regions or regionally. There is a lot to be said. I'm really happy to participate. I hope that the translation was clear. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much. And I am already, actually, we are running out of time, but I really do want to have, you know, the final reflections, including, you know, some of you answering some of the questions that has come from the floor. If it's okay with you, if we can extend the 15 more minutes, you know, of this session to be able to actually get to hear some of the comments and the questions from the audience. And I think, you know, I will be going around the final sort of a round, asking each of you maybe maximum 1 minute to share, you know, final key takeaway, including some of the questions and a comment from the audience. And then this is a question to all of you as speakers. I think in the last, you know, the Dr. Ashraf had mentioned about, you know, the importance of looking at the regional integrations, and then the importance of looking at the you know, the political instability. How can we actually address and tackle the issues, you know, particularly now with the financial sort of a constraints and so on. But at the same time, we also you know, will have to be sort of, you know, looking into a much more transformational infrastructure projects across the countries, across border, within the regions, across regions. So, you know, from your final sort of a thoughts, you know, what are the kind of, you know, the policies or macro, you know, policies or legal factors that can actually enable a successful public-private partnership, you know, to deliver this kind of transformational infrastructure projects that are actually for public good. So if you can also sort of, you know, reflect about some of those comments as you do the first final round, I think that would be very appreciated. And I think for Miss Linda Yang, and then also for Ahmed from Islamic Development Bank, I think you have a specific question from the audience that I hope you can also address in our final round. Again, 2 minutes maximum, you know, with your key takeaway, you know, anything that you want the audience to be really taking away from this discussion today. I'd like to start, you know, first with Mr. Khaled from a Moroccan Agency for International Cooperation. 2 minutes, the last word.
Yes. So thank you all for your brilliant intervention. I think we all agree that only financial approach to the development and the pandemic is not enough. We need to make it very tied to the human approach as well, and the human development mainly for the future generation, because solution will not just raise up in short time. So it has to be in distance. And in this way, so we think that this partnership private-public is a key. And as I presented in Morocco, we started this very challenging but also very successful experience to foster and to engage private and public in the same hand in hand. And we think also that there is a huge amount of finance on the table, but to make them sustainable, we need enough engagement, and from only public sector is not very sustainable. So we need definitely a very working approach between private and public within a sustainable model.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's very important to actually bring in the human-centered approach and not just looking at the financial sort of approach to development agenda. So thank you very much for that. Ms. Manal Ali, final word.
What's your question, ma'am, please?
Well, it's more final reflections. Just key takeaway, especially I think, responding to one of the questions that come from the audience, that, we need the scaling up of, transformational infrastructure projects that are of a public good, and what are the kind of, the macro policies or any kind of a legal framework that can actually harness, enable successful public-private partnership deliver such a project. But I mean, not just only responding, you could actually also share your final key takeaway that you want the audience to actually bring home from this discussion. If you could limit to a maximum 2 minutes, the final word, I think that would be great. Thanks.
You mean answer this question from audience? That
final word, because we will be wrapping up soon. If you want to respond to the specific question, that's great. If not, you can still sort of, share final key messages that you want the audience to take away.
Okay. Of course, there is a strong need for scaling up infrastructure investment in developing countries through transformational regional or cross-border infrastructure projects that the public offer public good. For us in Sudan, like we have special circumstances as a representative from Egypt from the Planning Strategy Center. We have a problem of what we call it استقرار سعر الصرف. We have a problem here in Sudan because of الظروف الاستثنائية اللي احنا بنمر بها هنا في السودان زي ما قلت لكي إنه
we have problems in the Sudan of the exchange rate. Also, we have political disturbances. We have different governments which created difficult economic conditions in the Sudan. Particularly, our government are trying to take out the name of Sudan from the blacklist of terrorism. We have sanctions imposed in the Sudan, and this is a problem that we encounter in cooperation, international cooperation. This makes investors to run away. The investor will not invest because of the situations, whether it's South-South or South-North. People are afraid to invest in the Sudan because of the political instability. Also because of the exchange rate, which is not fixed. What's important in the Sudan is, or in the Arab region, in order to attract investment, we need political stability. We need governance. In order to attract foreign investment and investors, there is a need for an investment law to protect investors so that they don't lose their capital and money. Also, security and stability is important. Security is a priority to attract investment and foreign investment. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Then I would like to turn to Ms. Linda Yang. I think you had a specific questions, from the audience, but you can also share your final word, key takeaway, maximum 2 minutes. Thank you.
Sure. Well, my final word is to the policymakers to enhance investment climate, to attract more high-quality international investments for sustainable development, as well as for post-pandemic recovery. I understand I also received a specific question. The question is about, as Chinese investors come from different regions from China and often have different investment priorities, how is that coordinated on the Chinese part to maximize their respective impact and contribution? Well, actually, no matter where the investor come from and what investment they make, I think it's the same for all international investors. The priority concern from the investors are to have good return from the investment, which is the goal for making an investment. So in China, it's the same. There's no government authority to coordinate how investors to make their impact and contribution through their investment in the receiving country. However, China is a very important and active player in South-South cooperation. Chinese government emphasizes the importance of sustainable development goals and green BRI. Green BRI means the investment projects should be environment friendly and contribute to sustainable investment, sustainable development. So Chinese companies are also encouraged to make commitment to social responsibility. So having the social impact and making contribution to development to receiving countries are key concerns of Chinese investors. I hope my answers, is helpful for the gentleman who raised the question.
Thank you very much. Now, turning to Ms. Lina Olaimi, your final thoughts.
Yes, there was actually a question as well in the Q&A on how the GCC blockade of Qatar may have impacted the efforts of enterprise development in the region. So I wanted to just touch on that briefly. Overall, I don't think it's had a huge impact. I think the greatest loss has been in the potential around the Qatar World Cup 2022. So I think with any significant large sporting event or mega event, there's always huge opportunities for entrepreneurs and investments. So that I think is a missed opportunity. And then just in terms of key takeaways, I think we all agree on the importance of greater collaboration. I think showing the win-win and the shared value opportunities for all stakeholders involved within the SDG context, but also just to highlight that we have the public-private, but also the public-planet collaborations with nature and not just for nature. And then finally, just to add that I think, or to conclude that there are several innovative finance mechanisms that I think still need to be leveraged, whether it's through de-risking investments, whether it's through catalytic finance, green bonds, social impact bonds. So that would be, those are my key kind of takeaways.
Thank you very much for also, answering one of the questions from the audience. Thank you so much. Dr. Ali Ibrahim, final word, and also responding to the question around the regional, the transformation of public infrastructure that are on public good. I think he did actually share his final thoughts, and maybe he might have left, unfortunately, already. So I will go to Mr. Ahmed Osman, final word.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you and thank all the speakers for a great workshop. I really learned a lot from the different speakers. I agree with His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Al-Arabi on that the Arab world or the Arab economies require structural changes in how our economic activity is currently being operated. I think we need to have a more diverse economy. We need to have more industrialization of our economies. We need to produce more rather than consume and import more. I see a growing trend of industrialization happening in Morocco, in Egypt, in many of our North African countries. I would like to see more of that happening in GCC countries as well. I think what has happened, the transformation happening in Bahrain in terms of startup acts incentivizing entrepreneurs is a model to be replicated in many countries. I think we have lots of talent in the Arab world. We have lots of technology, lots of ideas. The funding is around. It's just a matter of matchmaking the funds with the let's say smart ideas and smart entrepreneurs. Finally, I just want to reiterate the importance of really supporting women-led startups. We as ICSB think this is key, especially during the post-COVID-19 era of aggressive economic, let's say, restructuring and rebuilding of the world economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ahmed Adikan, a final word.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. This has been a very engaging workshop and very informative. So I'm just going to first maybe respond to the couple of questions that was posed by Ms. Grace also, as well as yourself, and then just have a final word. In terms of Ms. Grace's question and with regards to how we work with the private sector through reverse linkage and how we identify the partners from the private sector, we do have what we call mapping studies of resource centers. And this is a methodology that we've been using since 2014 to identify not just public sector, private sector, and third sector providers from our member countries, and we use very objective criteria, very scientific criteria in identifying these partners, potential partners in our reverse linkage interventions. So this is one tool that we use. Now, of course, in our reverse linkage interventions, one thing to keep in mind is that even when the private sector is involved, there's expectation that their participation has to fit in with the South-South and Triangular Cooperation Framework. So that means that they have to provide, it's not just something for their benefit, but it's also a mechanism of partnership where they have to contribute, technically and financially, which is, I think, this is an important dimension even for meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, where everybody is trying to sort of mobilize more resources from the private sector. Secondly, on some of the comments or the questions raised with respect to South-South cooperation in the context of conflict and how can countries continue to benefit. I think from our perspective, a thought that I could share is that we've continued, even in countries where there are conflicts going on, we are still continuing our operations. There are member countries, regardless of what happens within the country. So, for instance, we have an example of a very good project that's being developed between Yemen and Somalia in the microfinance sector for SMEs. So, so we're still pressing on. I think our perhaps advantage compared to commercial banks and commercial sector is that we are a multilateral development bank with a different, more forgiving risk profile, I suppose. And so we're continuing, to help our countries regardless of their situation. A final thought, I think, when it comes to private sector engagement, in general, as well as through South-South and Triangular Cooperation, the bank is committed to this. I think, even our president, His Excellency Dr. Bandar Hajjar's new strategy is that we have to become a more market-driven bank. We have to involve the private sector, in our interventions as much as we can. So we have to mobilize markets for development, and I think this is going to continue to remain as a key priority for the bank. And we will do our best to push forward with this reverse linkage mechanism as a way of engaging the private sector and trying to mobilize more resources through South-South and Triangular Cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Finally, Dr. Ashraf Arabi, final word, maximum 2 minutes.
شكرا جزيلا. يعني باختصار شديد.
In brief, I believe that sustainable development or sustainability is a culture. It's a way of life. It's not just an agenda or objectives or goals or indicators. We are still in the Arab regions far from sustainability. Although most or all Arab countries abide by achieving SDGs of 2015. However, after 5 years of this commitment, and despite their plans, announcement that they abide by SDGs, and they talk a lot about sustainable development. However, in fact, they are still, I believe, have not even started in achieving such sustainability. However, I confirm it's time now for reform, which is more difficult, more complex. Any delay in reform, unfortunately, will lead to more problems economically, socially, and insecurity. Most of the problems are based on economy because they haven't been treated in time. It's time to start to use this pandemic, COVID-19, to have more integration, to focus on interests and win-win in order to succeed in the Arab region. We need more cooperation and integration and collaboration and more involvement, which is productive and which has impact in the world order or in the new world order. This is an opportunity for us in South countries and in the Arab region. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for very rich discussions. Moderating discussions. I have also learned quite a lot of things. I like what you said, Dr. Arad, in terms of sustainability is culture, it's way of life, and we need to transform ourselves, our way of thinking, our way of doing, and that needs to be sort of, translated also in the transformation of policies, infrastructure investments, and so on. So it's very much, appreciated for all great wisdoms and experience and sharing of knowledge across all the speakers. I also learned about the public-private partnership. It's for me, it's actually a new word, and thank you very much for really enlightening. That a lot of expertise and innovations, a lot of knowledge, and the thinking that are actually already happening in many countries and many stakeholders and many sectors in the region. And I think there's a great opportunity to build on that and then really capitalize this sort of sharing of knowledge, expertise, and innovations, and also turning that into an investment and engagement with the private sector, including women startup and then the small medium enterprises going forward to really tackle a quite significant challenges that we know that we have ahead of us, and not just because of the COVID, but also really truly take the sustainable development agenda forward by 2030. So thank you so much all for a very rich discussion. I wouldn't necessarily want to summarize because we are already over time, and just to remind participants that we will be having a session tomorrow, the last day of the regional workshop, that's starting at the same time, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. I understand it will be done the 4:30 Bahrain time, but please check your work clock to be able to actually connect to the session tomorrow. As I said, the summary and recording of the discussion will be available on the South Corporation global on the Galaxy online platforms, and also conversation from today, and then also in from the workshop itself, informing a future research agenda of the global thinker network of the South Corporation. So thank you so much for your all patience. I'm sorry I wasn't able to actually keep the time, but good night, good evening, good afternoon, and for some of us who are actually starting a day, have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yuko. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.